Hey everyone, so I want to give a little advice to students taking part in the March for Our Lives movement. If you are going to put yourself out there and speak in front of crowds and hold up signs, it would do you well to research a little bit and get your facts straight. Now, of course, these students have every right to speak their mind, but as it happens, I have the right to respond. I have heard too many of these students repeat blatant falsehoods that are incredibly easy to look up and disprove. I have heard AR-15s referred to as fully automatic or assault rifles far too many times. This is just downright not true. They are semi-automatic. I don't know how many times I've heard it said from people not a part of this march. This means that you cannot hold the trigger down and spray a hail of bullets. They do not work like that. To say otherwise only shows that you have not done proper research. I have heard these students speaking as if there is a rising epidemic of gun violence in the US. Again, it takes mere moments to look it up and find that that is not true. If these students actually did their research, their paranoia might be quelled. There is obviously, however, gun violence in the US. I am not saying it never happens, but as I've said in other videos, there are a lot of things you can do to diminish gun violence. Boycott the mainstream media when it encourages copycat crimes by plastering the shooter's name, face, life story, and body count all over the screen. Stop watching them. Send the message that CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, you name it, they will be losing ad revenue if they engage in this coverage. That is far more likely to put a dent in gun violence than any gun legislation Washington, D.C. ever will come up with. Also, end the war on drugs. A black market equals violence. Throwing products into the realm of illegality makes for a marketplace run by violence and not by non-violent competitive business practices. You end the war on drugs and you will most assuredly see a very large decline in gun deaths in the US. Just as we saw with ending alcohol prohibition in the US in the 30s, we saw a large decline in homicides and violent crime. And it doesn't help that we border Mexico, which, as I've said before, has been a narco state for quite some time due to the United States exporting our war on drugs around the world. So much of this unnecessary gun violence and death can be solved through these means. This is, quite frankly, a far superior response than simply yelling slogans at the Capitol building for politicians to write more laws. It won't work. They are far too easy to circumvent. Now, many of these students, especially those from Parkland, have recently gone through a tragedy, and I am not trying to diminish a clearly emotional time for them. It is completely normal to feel the way they are feeling, given what they've experienced, but since when do highly emotional teenagers engage in logic, rational, and critical thinking? Again, I do not mean to take anything away from them in terms of how they must be feeling. I am sure it was traumatizing, and I mean that sincerely. But that is just it. Someone who just went through a highly emotional and traumatic experience would be the last person I would take advice from on how to rationally deal with an issue. This is a knee-jerk reaction from these students. They clearly have become enveloped by emotion, which leads them to yell in downright false chants and has led them to waving around factually incorrect signs. They are operating on pure emotion while being seemingly incapable of rational and well-researched arguments. Unfortunately for them, their lack of knowledge on this issue and their surplus of misguided passion is impossible to not notice. Thank you, and that's all.